The Pope-like monster is a humanoid creature from Louisville, Kentucky that has features of a goat and/or sheep. This monster is said to reside beneath a railroad trestle bridge that runs over Pope-Lick Creek, and while the legends about him have become deeply entrenched in local culture, there have been no actual reported sightings. I tried to find an exact origin for this guy, but I couldn't find anything from the surface-level research I'm limiting myself to for the sake of time. The only site I could see that looked promising from the blurb naturally did not want to load. As far as I could tell, this is likely just a scary story someone told to keep kids away from the bridge since its construction around the late 1800s. The story spread and it took on a life of its own, as scary stories often do. The Cryptid Wiki describes the Pope-Lick monster's appearance as a human-goat hybrid with a grotesquely deformed body of a man. It has powerful, fur-covered goat legs, an alabaster-skinned face with an aquiline nose, and wide-set eyes. Short, sharp horns protrude from the forehead, nestled in long, greasy hair that match the color of the fur on the legs. There are several variations of how this monster came to be, with two versions being particularly popular. One is that the monster was a farmer who sacrificed goats in satanic rituals and, after his death, returned to the world of the living as the hybrid beast. The second version is that he was part of a circus and escaped after enduring mistreatment. Whatever his backstory is, he is always described as being aggressive and seeks to harm or kill those with whom he crosses paths. Rumors abound as far as what the creature actually does to people who venture onto his turf. Some say he likes to jump into passing cars as they go beneath the bridge, potentially startling the car's occupants into wrecking. Other stories have him attacking intruders with an axe. As scary as those direct attacks may be, his most creepy method of inflicting harm is also the least confrontational. In these tales, the Pope-Lick monster lures people onto the bridge by mimicking the voices of people they know, thereby putting them in the path of an oncoming train. Unfortunately, that last tidbit most definitely has its roots in truth. In spite of looking rickety and dilapidated, at least to my eyes, the trestle bridge is still very much in use. There have been several actual incidents where legend trippers have climbed the bridge in search of the monster and have either been hit by a train or fallen off the bridge while trying to avoid being hit by a train. The bridge has gained such notoriety that a fence has been put up to keep people from attempting to climb it, though this is but a small deterrent to people who are determined to encounter the monster for themselves. When it comes to the art for this creature, it definitely did not give me as much trouble as the Dover Demon. Anatomically, he's pretty similar to monsters I've drawn in the past, so I didn't have any woes when it came to deciding what features to give him. I did deviate slightly from the description given on the Cryptid Wiki, however. The article there states that he's just a man-goat hybrid, but since other descriptions also say there's sheep mixed in there, I decided to give him horns reminiscent of a Jacob sheep. I also thought he'd be more intimidating with 4 big horns instead of 2 short ones. Some renditions of him also show him with human-like hair on his head, but just out of my own personal preference, I gave him regular animal fur all over. The hardest decision-making about all of this was actually what setting to place him in. Since his backstory and behavior both have horror vibes, my first inclining was to go with a night scene or a gloomy, foggy scene. Then I started looking up references of the actual bridge, and a lot of the pictures were showing it in full daylight with all this greenery growing around it, and I was just like, if this creature were real, he wouldn't just be hanging out when it's scary outside. He has to live there all the time, so why not show him hanging out in the daylight? He's a goat. I'm sure he's out there doing all the regular goat things like climbing and browsing when he's not partaking in murder and psychological torture, so here we are. One thing I will gladly admit is that I'm not used to drawing man-made objects, so the perspective of the bridge gave me a little bit of grief, and ultimately I just let it be. It's fine. It's implied, and that's all that matters to me. It didn't stop me from enjoying the creation of this piece. So for y'all watching this playlist, it's only been a few minutes since you saw me use watercolors last, but for me it's been about 3 months since I used them, so this was a lovely little reintroduction to the medium. As usual, I used colored pencil to define the lines and shade to get that bit of contrast I can never accomplish with watercolor by itself. I printed this piece out onto actual watercolor paper instead of doing this in my sketchbook, and I am so glad I did. I feel like the colors look way better and the paints were far easier to push around where I wanted them. In case you're interested, this is Fabriano hot pressed paper. I was under the impression that hot pressed paper is more difficult to lift paint off of than cold pressed, but this particular paper allows you to lift really easily, at least in my experience. So that's that, let's move on.